This is the sequence in Blade Runner where Roy Batty finally meets his creator, Dr. Tyrell. We start with a shot of the owl, very tightly framed, in very, very shallow focus. And we notice, of course, the way that the light shines on the owl's right eye. We know that the owl is a replicant already, it's been referred to earlier in the film, but it's very, very clear here. It's very tidy, the way that this sequence begins and ends in the owl. The sound in the sequence is vital in creating its meaning, and we hear the sound of a door opening just as the owl turns its head. We get a wider shot of Tyrell's room, very much in the same style as the room we saw earlier where Rachel was first introduced. We've got the same mishmash of classical styles going on. The use of candles to light the space is not very energy efficient, but gives it this wonderful look where Tyrell's space is extremely different from the artificiality and neon lights of the rest of the film. We've got also the antique furniture going on. The light that shines on some unseen water reflecting this rippling pattern across the wall is also the same as we saw earlier in the first scene with Tyrell. There we see Tyrell's bed, a four-poster, more candles, and Tyrell in this extremely elaborate dressing gown. His response is interesting, mildly surprised, which he then quickly represses. Surely he knows how dangerous Batty is. There we see Sebastian coming from the door, more reflected light. Roy stays partially hidden and definitely out of focus, where he will now move into focus for the first of a few times during this sequence. In terms of the classic Hollywood style of presenting a scene, there's a lot of convention going on here. We've got the wider shots of the room, we've got three characters coming in, shot reverse shot follows eyeline matches, and we're going to find ourselves largely confined to a series of repeated shots. So we've got the triangular situation of the whole sequence. It's established in this long over-the-shoulder shot. Tyrell, of course, in shallow focus. The candles are centre of the frame. Roy starting to walk into focus. Evident rule of thirds going on in the composition here as well. As Sebastian walks forward, Tyrell is very, very conversational. Now this whole sequence is, of course, steeped in mythology. We've got the idea of Prometheus, the creator of a type of human. We've also got the idea of Tyrell as God and Batty as perhaps Adam, but also Lucifer, the fallen angel, come to meet his maker. A quick word from Roy to Sebastian to stay where he is. Roy is in charge of the scene, he's positioning everyone, and the lighting, very significant here now. Roy has walked into that centre of the screen in this longest shot. There he is with his stark chiaroscuro lighting on his face, the blondness of his hair contrasting with the blackness of his coat. He's dominating the sequence here. It becomes increasingly evident that Tyrell is the polar opposite, wearing this very elaborate, light-coloured robe with black hair. So the shot reverse shot emphasises the contrast between the two, and that leads into this closer shot of Roy. He walks again into focus. We note the inhumanity of his eyes with the use of the Blade Runner replicant lighting effect. The focus is very, very shallow. Roy's very, very sweaty here. The lighting, of course, also provides the contrast in opposites. Roy's right cheek is lit, whereas Tyrell's left cheek is lit. Tyrell is very peculiar in his attitude here, outwardly showing no fear, though he obviously must realise what a difficult situation this is. A shot of Sebastian to remind us that he's still here, witness to all this, as he walks behind the candles. I don't want to get into analysing the dialogue too much at this stage. We've got all sorts of potential fictitious science solutions that are being waved away as impractical. A shot of Sebastian makes him seem furtive behind bars, peeping Tom, the observer, the outsider character. Sebastian seems amused that Roy isn't getting what he wanted. If we contrast Sebastian and Tyrell with Roy in the peak of physical perfection, even though his life is very short, Tyrell's glasses make him look very alien-like, very insect-like perhaps, but certainly very, very strange. And Sebastian, of course, is prematurely aging and very socially awkward. And we see the contrast in the real humans in the film and the outward perfection, the physical grace of the replicants. In terms of blocking the actors, we see Roy starting to circle Tyrell just as the camera starts to pan ever so slightly to the left. The focus shifts. This is very, very detailed cinematography, obviously worked out very, very carefully. Roy in focus, white hair, black coat. Tyrell out of focus, white robe. Roy sits down, deciding to take away perhaps the dominance that we've seen as his increasing frustration grows. And the camera follows him. And then we see a reverse. As we track forward slightly towards Roy, we see Tyrell start to circle round. More very clever blocking and all in one shot. Very carefully worked out sequence of events from both the camera and the two actors here. Roy increasingly realises his situation is hopeless. And Tyrell shows no emotion at all, perhaps building up the frustration. He's the scientist, shows no remorse. His interest in these matters is purely academic, scientific, without realising the suffering he's caused. Tyrell raises that hand again, something he did in the first time he met Deckard. Likes to wave that finger, quite a patronising image. The Vangelis soundtrack seems to be largely composed of wind chimes for the first part. Gradually we have a rising chorus of voices, synthesizer, percussion, building up the inevitable violent outcome to the sequence. Sebastian seems to find this more and more entertaining. This perhaps dooms him, and here the whole father-son aspect becomes much more prominent. Tyrell comes into the shot down to Roy's level. Roy's very much the little boy at this point. I've done questionable things, he says. Tyrell is the aloof father to a son who's only looking for love. This is, of course, going to doom him. Again, Roy in focus, Tyrell out of focus, shifting just before the cut. And here, Roy becomes more the Satan character. Better to reign in hell than to serve in heaven. His situation is hopeless, so he will take everything down with him as the sweat drips down his face and down his nose. And then this most surprising moment where we see a homosexual kiss, but the affection, of course, is going to turn to horror. And it's all done in extremely intimate close-up. Highly surprising from a 1980s film to get something that intimate. Less surprising to go in for the close-up of the violence, and the foley of the murder is ramped up, and we can hear quite clearly the sound of fingers entering the eyeballs. The blinding of Tyrell, of course, also links back to Greek myth and the blinding of Oedipus, the person who has seen too much. And there the irony of those thick glasses that can't protect his eyes. Eyes in general in the whole film are, of course, really important, the way of seeing the world. Tyrell is blinded at the point of death. Extremely violent moment. Shot, reverse shot. As we focus more on Roy's response to what he's doing, and Sebastian's horrified realisation that this is what his actions have led to. Really big close-up there, right at the point of maximum violence. A shocking climactic moment. Highly sexualised violence. Again, characterises the nastier end of 1980s cinema. And neatly, the owl turns away. That impassive fake eye. Cut to the lift going down, again suggestive of the descent into hell. Roy again, Satan or Lucifer, emphasised by the light. What's the emotion there? Guilt, sadness, realisation, despair. And finally we dissolve into the next scene, this very blue sci-fi coded tunnel.